my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So in the interest of time, I'll quickly walk through this deck and then we'll take up the questions. Um, to start off, these are the areas I just want to deep dive, especially into the areas we test on a product manager, and I'll not go into specific what does a product manager do. So I want to clearly differentiate that cracking an interview is a different skill set, whereas actually being a product manager may be a different skill set. And to be good at cracking the interviews, it is required that you practice these things and be good at these things. So the most important thing that a product manager gets tested on is the product design questions. So that is really important, and I'll drill down into it as to what is expected in product design. The second thing they are tested on is metrics, how good they are with numbers, and whether they can define success criteria for their product or not. The third thing they can be tested is specifics on the resume, the products they have worked on, what they have written in their resume. Those things can be tested uh, on. And from round to round, these tests may differ. That round one may just be a product design round, whereas round two may be product design and metrics round. Then there could be a round just based on your resume. So you'll be grilled on each of these things when you're interviewing at top companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon. The another set of questions that we tend to ask is related to behavior, which is more of judging cultural fit and how you handle particular scenarios. Uh, the next set of questions that can be asked is technical questions, but that really depends on the profile of the candidate. If a candidate was a software engineer or was into technical roles, it is assumed that he'll know more, and therefore we tend to ask more technical questions to such candidates. And some rounds could be on guesstimate questions. And I think I'll not be touching up on technical questions and guesstimate today, and my major focus will be on product design. So let's start with the product design part. So in product design questions, these are the things that you should really focus on when you're answering a product design question. The first thing is you must ask clarifying questions. So let's say as an interviewer, you come for the interview and I ask you this question: design an app for theme park for children. Now, when I ask you this question and you straight away start giving me solution, then it's a red flag for me. I'll not be taking such a candidate, because as a product manager, it is very, very important that you understand the problem and you answer the why and what of the problem. And here, the first and the foremost important thing is that you ask, why do you want to build this mobile app? So it could be for various reasons, and then you validate with the interviewer. So do you want to improve the user experience? Do you want to generate revenue? Do you want to increase engagement? What is the goal that you are trying to achieve? And sometimes the question itself could be very ambiguous, and that is done intentionally to see whether you clarify the question or not, and then proceed with the solution, because it is imperative that the product manager clearly understands the problem before starting the solution. That's what we are testing you on by giving you such an ambiguity. The next thing is it should be user-centric. This is majorly related to the personas that will come into when you're solving the problem. So taking on the same example, like when you're designing a theme park for it, an app for theme park, what are the user personas you'll think of? You'll think of kids. Now in kids, you can again define various kinds of kids. There are kids which are below 10 years, have different requirements. Kids are between 10 and 18 have different requirements. Parents, another people who will accompany kids, and there are grandparents who can accompany kids. And if you look at this, every segment would have different requirement. And when you're building a product and you're not focused towards the persona that you're building for, you'll not build a good product. So it is very, very important that you list out all the user personas who are important for designing that product, and clearly outline to the interviewer, this is the persona that I'm trying to solve this problem for. The next thing is structure. This is the single most element that we look for, especially at top companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon. This is a non-negotiable parameter. If your answer is not structured, it's most likely you'll not be selected in the interview. By structure, I mean there are various ways in which you can form structure, but I'll just give you one example of how I form a structure. Like clarifying, when I asked you a question, whether you're asking a clarifying question or not. That is one part. Then whether you're defining the user personas or not. The third part could be laying out all the use cases for that particular problem. The fourth could be clearly stating the pain points that are there in that particular. Then fifth point could be coming up with the solutions. Then the sixth point could be discussing the trade-offs. And the seventh point could be measuring success in terms of defining metrics. So this is one structure that you follow to come up with a solution, and this is non-negotiable. Never get into solutioning without any structure. You will not be selected, I can assure you for that. So the next point is use case coverage. And it is important that as a product manager, you are able to think end to end for a product. So all the use cases must be covered. So when you're thinking about designing an app for a theme park, you have to think for an experience before entering to the theme park, when you enter in the theme park, and when you leave in the theme park. This 3 point itself in it is a structure that I look for, that you're clearly able to identify there are three journeys that a user goes through before when you're designing an app for a theme park. And then you'll design experiences for each of these. What will user do when before entering the theme park? What are the important components? What should you focus on? When the user is in the theme park, what should you focus on? What kind of experience? And when the user leaves the theme park, what are the experiences you would focus on? And the next point is related to having an innovative and a creative element in your answer. So sometimes it is difficult, but this is what will differentiate you from other candidates. And this is the wow factor that can impress an interviewer and get you selected. So always look for that innovative and creative answer amongst all the list of features that you're coming for. Can you give one feature that stands out that no other candidate has given out? That will make you stand out. And as a person, I'll remember you, because especially at big companies like Microsoft and Google, we receive thousands of applications and we interview hundreds of candidates for a position. So if all the candidates that I interview from morning to evening answer the same in the same way, I will not remember them. The candidate who stands out is the one who would have differentiated themselves in providing these innovative and creative solutions. And the last 2 points that I want to focus on is navigating ambiguity and depth. So these are something that we will be testing you in the bar raiser round or towards the end. So we increase the ambiguity, and this is the reason we do it is because as a product manager, there's a lot of ambiguity in our role. So the structure, that's why we look at structure. The structure is what helps you navigate through those ambiguity. And sometimes we also test candidates on depth. By depth, what I mean is like coming to the same problem, I can keep asking you about, think of all the user personas, and you give me three, and I ask you to give me three more. Can you think of it or not? So just forcing you to deep dive into that particular segment of the problem and just seeing whether you can think through things or not. And we also test whether a candidate gives up or not. So you should try to focus on that depth. Now, amongst the product questions, these are few bread and butter for a PM interview questions. Like they'll definitely be asked. One of the questions is, how do you prioritize your roadmap? And you'll be really tested on this. So be very prepared for this question, and different companies do it different ways. But think about it when you're answering this question, because this is something a product manager does day in, day out, and it's one of the very important parameters on which they are judged. Second is, how do you collect feedback for the product that you have built? There are multiple forums and ways of doing this. Be thorough. How do you do it? Read books, read forums, and you'll come up with new methods to collect feedbacks and use all of those in your answers. The another question that is always asked is, as a PM, you'll always have to sell your ideas because there will be so many competing ideas in the market. So how would you do that as a PM? And finally, one of the questions which is frequently asked is feature to requirement conversion. Because if you have a feature, then as a PM, you have to communicate that feature to the engineering team. So how would you convert that feature into a requirement? Be thorough with these questions because they are most likely going to be asked in the interview. The next part I want to focus, and in the interest of time, I'll go through these things quickly, is in terms of metrics. And at Microsoft, we focus on hard framework. And there's another framework which is ARM. And when you Google it, you'll find more frameworks. But I just want to tell you that these are ways in which you can remember things for the interview. And in the end, when you're delivering your solutions, make sure that you talk about these success metrics. Heart basically stands for happiness of the customer, engagement of customer, adoption rate, retention rate, and task success. I'll not go in depth in the interest of time, but you can Google it and you'll find this framework. It's an industry used framework, but it really gives you a structured way in which you can think and define metrics. ARM is similarly, it stands for acquisition, activation, retention, monetization. So you basically think on all these pillars and try to structure your answers. The next point I want to touch up on is resume. So first thing about resume is the first impression that you give to an interviewer, and based on that, you'll get a call or no call. So what we look for in a resume is that it should not be very long, first thing. So generally it is recommended that if you have close to 5 years of 5 to 7 years of experience, less than 7 years of experience, you should not have a resume which is more than one pager. And if you have 7+ years of experience, 1.5 page is what we recommend. Because when we are shortlisting resume, we get so many applications, we do not have time to read through all the stories that you write. So this also helps you cut down on non-important things in your resume and you only focus on the important ones. Now, after that, another thing that you should focus on is impact. So your resume, every line in your resume should be impact driven. You did something is okay. Don't tell me about the action. Tell me about the result. What happened when you took a particular action? So the more you make it impact driven, the chances of you getting called for an interview is higher. The next point I want to talk about is tell me about yourself, which is one of the most famous questions which you'll get at the start of the interview. But it's not a question that is asked just, for the sake of asking. Obviously, it's an icebreaker question, but it also helps build on the interview. And you can use this to your advantage to drive an interview. And so my advice would be, when you're telling about yourself, you should focus on the areas which you are good at. Because a lot of times what happens when we shortlist a candidate, we do not have enough time to actually read through each and every line of the resume. And that's why we ask this question, so that when you're going through that, if I find anything interesting, I'll ask based on that. I'll build from there. So it's a very, very important point where you can drive the interview the way you want to drive it. And therefore, have your tell me about yourself crisp, and make sure you have that element in the tell me about yourself that you want the interviewer to take the direction. For example, I have co-founded a startup and I want interviewers to talk about that startup. So I make it my tell me about yourself that it goes in that direction, and really then I am driving that particular round rather than the interviewer driving that round. And from that, there would also be, at least at Microsoft, we do ask a product design question based on the product that you have built, and we go in depth. So when you're telling me about yourself, you'll be talking about your products, and I'll be picking up a product. So be sure that the product that you talk about, you're really thorough with it, and you can answer all the questions related to that. So one last section is the behavioral question. And here my small advice is always follow the SAR framework to answer questions: situation, action, result. Again, this gives you a structure to answer a question. So in behavioral questions, there's no right and wrong answer as such. What differentiates a good candidate from a bad candidate is the structure in which they answer the questions. So following this clearly outlines and tells the interviewer that this was the situation you were in and what are the actions you took and not the team, but you took, and what was the impact of taking those actions. So I'll recommend to use this framework for behavioral questions. The final advice, be who you are. We hire everyone for their uniqueness. So I may hire a guy who's from a startup because he brings something different to my organization, because all the other team members in my team are from big companies, and therefore it's a diverse thought process that comes to my team. So always be who you are. You don't know what element of you is unique to that team, and you'll be good at that when you go for an interview. So remember, they hire you for your uniqueness. The second important takeaway from this is, no matter what question you are answering, it's not the answer that I'm looking at. That is relatively of low importance, rather than the structure or the way in which you arrived at that answer. Because in many situations, there will not be any right or wrong answer. It's just the way you arrived at that answer, the thought process that you used to arrive at that answer. So structure is key. And practice a lot of product design questions, because this is important and it can vary from you, the variety of questions can be huge. So the more you practice, the more better you become at it. So that's my advice for cracking the PM interview. And these are some of the books that you can read. uh, Cracking the PM interview, Decode and Conquer, and this will help you in getting some of the thoughts and insights. And
Great.
finally, we can have the Q&A now.
Great. Thank you very much, Prashant. It was a very structured and great presentation from which I took a lot of things for myself personally, and I hope that our listeners too. I just want to remind everyone that you can ask questions in our chat, and we will try to answer them. So now I will share my screen so that we can together find all the questions that we have already prepared and try to read them and maybe answer. I really think that you have covered most of them already, but still, let's see what we have there. Just a second. Okay. So, yep, have some small issues here. The first question is, so sample questions in a PM interview. What questions will you ask in a PM interview, and what criteria will make you think that the candidate is the right choice?
Okay, that's a good question, and it's one of the questions that you'll always come across, that what are the questions you should ask at the end of the interview. So one thing which is really important that we look at is how passionate you are to join a team. So let's say that in Microsoft, we have a cloud team, which is Azure, we have an Office team, and we have various sets of other teams. And I'm interviewing you for the cloud team, the Azure team. So what happens is, some of the candidates tend to ask us questions related to Office products. I mean, it's not bad to ask those questions, but it really shows me that you're not so passionate about joining the Azure team or the cloud team. So this is something you shouldn't do. That you should be very focused in asking some of the questions that is very specific to that team. And I can give you a few examples which are like a generic question which you can always ask. So like one question could be, what are the current challenges this particular team is facing in past 3 months or past 6 months? And it shows that you're interested in solving problems, you're interested in knowing the challenges. Shows me that you are a candidate who's open to take challenges. So these are some of the questions that you can ask, which shows interest towards that particular role in that particular team. I mean, at a company level, it's good if you ask, but you should definitely show interest in that particular team when you're answering the questions.
Thank you. So basically, you have to be really willing to work in a team that you are applying for. That's like
Right.
the key to a good interview from the beginning. Yeah, I agree.
Right.
So the next question is, yeah, so this is about the resources that should be used for interviews. You already suggested the books. Maybe there's something more.
Sure. So another resource that I would recommend is you can Google some of the interview questions, especially on Glassdoor, and depending on who you are interviewing for. But if you really want to practice, you can go to product manager questions from Google, from Microsoft, from Amazon, and you'll find a lot of questions on Glassdoor. The only challenge over there is that you have a lot of good questions, but you don't have answers to all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, you can go through the books that I recommended and the frameworks I told you about. You can read about that. Make sure, like I said, the correct answer is not important. How you arrive at that answer is important. So use the structure to arrive at those answers. And in many cases, you will realize that structure helps you navigate when the problem has an ambiguity. So you'll at least be able to solve a lot of it just because of the structure over there. And I like it if you do it that way. And other resources would be, yeah, read. So you should go through TechCrunch. That is something I follow for reading articles. The reason I follow that is what happens is when a new feature is about to come, or by Facebook, Instagram, any of the companies, you'll generally see news related to that on TechCrunch, and you can very cleverly use it as a wow feature in your product design question. So read TechCrunch articles to get those wow factors, wow features into your product.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So basically, the structure and preparation for the interviews through an internet. So yeah, how is program manager different from product manager? I myself also don't really understand. So can you please help
Mhm.
us here?
Sure. So one of the differences in program management and product management is that uh, in program management, it is expected that you all are also responsible for the timelines of the product or the project execution, whereas product manager is not at all responsible for the timelines as to when the product would be delivered. He is only responsible to answer the what and why we are solving a problem, and that's where the buck stops. Whereas the companies who have designation of product manager, they'll have a scrum master or a project manager, majorly project manager, who will be driving the timelines. Whereas company who have program manager as a designation, it's not a generic definition and can vary from company to company. I'm talking more in context of Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
uh, you would also see that there are project managers who would be responsible for timelines. That's the major difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. It's very interesting how it differs from company to company because as for my company, where product manager is also responsible for a timeline, so he plays kind of the second role.
Yeah, I also want to add this up, one more point, that in startups, since you will be constrained for resources, this is a trend, like you mentioned, is very common, that you will be responsible for most of the things. Like you'll be responsible for product management, project management, resource management. So yeah, and when a company matures from a mid-sized company, you'll have more defined roles, and in a very big company, you'll have better defined roles, which will
Mm-hmm.
uh, give you limited responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I wanted to know the roles and responsibilities of the product manager, what a PM resume should look like, and how to make it outstand from others.
Mhm. Okay, there are multiple questions in this, so
Yeah.
let me take the first one first. I wanted to know the roles and responsibility of the product manager. Okay, this I can talk for hours, but yeah, I'll just try to keep it crisp. So just to answer this in a crisp way, I would say that The product manager is majorly responsible to define a problem and to answer the what and the why of a problem. The product manager is not responsible to answer the how of a problem. The how of a problem is answered by the engineering team. So if you're building a car, you are only responsible as a product manager to define what are the features the car will have. Like it should drive at this speed, it should have a handle, it should have a door, how many doors, you can define that, uh, what whether it will have air conditioning or not. All this are responsibilities of a product manager. But what it it should drive at the speed is something you defined, but what engine should be used to drive at that particular speed is the engineering decision. Whether they use a Ford engine, Fiat engine, you should not interfere in those decisions. If you're doing that, then you're crossing the line and you're going towards solving an engineering problem where these are the don'ts for a product manager. So always remember, as a product manager, your responsibility is to define why you want to solve a problem, and you should be able to convince your engineering team, because those are the people, and obviously your management team, why you want to solve that particular problem. So you are justifying the return on investment over there. And the second is, if you are able to convince why you want to solve that problem, then what problem are you going to solve in that particular field? That's where you should stop, and you should never get into how of solving a problem. That's an engineering decision.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to the second part, what a PM resume looks like, how to make it outstand from others. So I had it in the slides. The most important thing is, don't make your resume action driven. Make your resume impact driven. That's what will differentiate you from others. Always, whenever you read a line, please justify what is the impact and not the action. And also, to do this, follow that definition that your resume should not be more than one page if you have 5 to 7 years of experience, because you will eliminate a lot of non-important things from your resume, just asking this question, how much of an impact this line brings compared to the next line that I've written, and you'll have the ones which are most impactful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's move on. What do you have next? Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting question, and I also think it differs from company to company. So how you in Microsoft actually evaluate the cultural fit of a candidate? How do you understand that he will fit in your team and in your company?
Right. So I'll answer for Microsoft, and I'll tell you how you can do it for any company. So especially the big companies, what we look at in cultural fit is how do you fit into the culture that we have. So, and that is majorly defined by our vision statement. So if you look at Microsoft's vision statement, it is to empower each and every person on the planet to achieve more. That is the vision statement that we have. So you think about this vision statement, and we will, when we are interviewing you, we will see whether your answers are aligning, or whether you interestingly are bringing this vision statement in one of your answers. If you do it, I'll really like you. If you just tell me what is the vision statement of Microsoft, I'll like you, because you care about that statement. That differentiates you from other candidates. A lot of candidates come who don't know about the vision statement of Microsoft or Google or any company that you're interviewing for. And it's a trick. I'll tell you that there's a question they'll always ask you, why Microsoft, or why Google, or why this role. You should always link the vision that a company has in your answer, that you believe in that particular vision. I'm sure that if you're applying to a company, you believe in their vision. So you should say that statement explicitly to the interviewer. You should not keep it in your head. A lot of time, even if the candidate knows it, they don't say it. Just say it. You'll be differentiated from other candidates just by saying the vision statement that you believe in. So that is one of the important parameters that we look at. The other important parameter we look at is what is the unique quality that you bring. It's just not because Microsoft also tends to learn from other companies, and there are certain best practices that we would want to incorporate from other companies. So try to bring out that uniqueness in your interviews.
Mhm. Great, thanks. So, how should I prepare for product manager interview at Microsoft? I have absolutely no experience in product management role.
Mhm. So yeah, first I would advise you to go through those two books that I've recommended. Those are really so cracking the PM interview is written by someone who's worked at Microsoft and Google. So it's a very nice book. It'll give you a structure and it'll also give you understanding of the role. Uh, and second, I would recommend you to read the Decode and Conquer book. Once you're done with this, I would strictly I mean, the books also talk about the structure. Following those structure, I would recommend that you just Google program manager interview questions. And you would find a ton of interview questions on Glassdoor. Practice those questions, validate the answers with someone you know is a PM, or uh, I mean, if you just reach out to anyone at Microsoft on LinkedIn, they can also help you. And there's so many other groups. Like this is a great initiative by the Product Star Group. So if you reach out to such forums, you'll get help. And this is the starting point I would recommend, to read the books and then go through the questions.
Great. So, if I understood you correctly, there is actually an opportunity to transition from one role to another and to start from a Microsoft. So, for example, I've been working as an engineer, and then I decided that I'm more interested in the product management role. So, it's possible to transition, right?
Absolutely, it's absolutely possible to transition, and you just need to have that mindset. I mean, to prepare for the role, and especially engineers have an inherent advantage when they are moving to product management role. So before being a product manager, I also was an engineer, and software engineers have an inherent advantage moving to product manager role, because a large part of product management involves working with the engineering team and understanding engineering problems. So you can relate to it much quicker than others. Therefore, like engineers have an inherent advantage. I mean, there are certain cons also associated with that you bring because of that. But yeah, definitely you are more on the
Yes.
positive. And we also have a lot of engineers who have transitioned to program management role at Microsoft. So it will not be a challenge.
Okay, thank you. So I think we already had this question about the
Right.
cultural fit. So
Right.
let's skip this one and move to the next one. Yeah. Yeah. So during your experience passing those interviews, what are the most unexpected questions that you had that you weren't prepared, or otherwise you didn't expect but you were prepared to answer?
Right. This is a very interesting question. So, one area where I always felt I can do better is product design questions, because they're endless. I mean, if you just Glassdoor, you'll have say 60 pages from Microsoft, 60 from Google, Amazon, and there's so many other companies. And every product design question can vary in such a vast area. Like somebody wants a gardening app, somebody wants a Uber app, somebody wants a app for air taxi, somebody wants to just create employee experience, theme parks. Like it's a non-stop thing. So this is where I was really challenged, like going even now you can, I feel I can be challenged. This is one domain because it's so vast. It's very difficult for anyone to know all the domains, because if you want to come out with a wow feature kind of an answer, it is very important that you have some idea about the product, or the domain in which you want to design the product. And when I'm asking an interviewer the question, you don't even get the time to research. You might not even have heard about that domain. So uh, product design are the most challenging questions that I have come across, and even now I feel they are the most challenging questions. You can all, no matter how much prepared you are, you can always get a question in product design that you're not prepared for. And at that point, again, I'll reiterate, your structure will help you navigate the ambiguity. You may not do wow, but you'll definitely do okay in case if the domain is totally not known to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. So anyway, be prepared, but still you may have some
Mhm.
questions. So yeah, this is it for the prepared questions. Let me check just what, yeah, we have actually some questions here. Let me
Mhm.
choose some. So here are questions about the technical skills that are required for product managers. What are the top three uh, technical skills that you should have as a product manager?
Um, so that's a tough question. Actually, in terms of technical skills, what you need. So you should be good with numbers. Uh, so you should be good at calculating matrix. So one of the rounds could be guesstimate, and that is just to see how comfortable you are with numbers. The other thing that you so there the reason this question is tough is because it is always in context of what role you're interviewing for, because a senior product manager will be tested on a different skill set, a product manager will be tested on a different skill set and different expectations, and a group product manager may be tested on different skill set. But to come up with a common theme, one would be that you should be good with numbers and metrics. The other thing that you should be good with is creating uh, converting requirements to features, which is more of a creating product roadmap. The third thing that is really imperative is having a vision for the product. You will constantly be required to have a vision for the product that you're going to work on or build. So these are the three important skills required for. Besides that, there are certain other important skills that I can talk of, like cross-functional team collaboration. A product manager has to collaborate with many teams. So you should be good with your networking skills. That will really help you navigate the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Where those relationships really matter. So that is another skill that is very, very important.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So, and I think we'll have the last questions for today. So,
Mhm.
there is a person who asks, it just looks like me. So, I have started my product journey and have 1 year of experience. How do I enhance my product skill?
Okay, that's a good question. So besides the skill I talked about, to enhance your product skills, uh, again, one advice I'll definitely give you is uh, what happens when we are in a job, especially in comfortable jobs, uh, we don't give interviews. And the good part about giving interviews is it gives you a framework, a structure. Why do we just think about this? Why are the questions which are asked in an interview, they are asked? Why are they asked? They are asked because it tests you on product management skills, and those are the skills which will be required in your day-to-day job. That's why we test you on those skills. So my advice would be, even if you're not interviewing for any company, just go through these questions which are asked in product management interview and try to solve them, the product design questions. See the structure. So the breadth that you'll be covering just by solving these questions will enhance your skills in different domains, and discuss them, if possible, discuss them with your colleagues. uh, and like this is a great forum, right? When you become part of such forums, not only this, there are multiple other forums. You'll see people talking about this, you'll be able to relate to them, and you'll always be proactive. So join. So these are few, to summarize, these are few things that you can do. First is, even if you are not giving an interview, practice product design questions. It is what you do right as a product manager. It will enhance your skills. Join forums like the Product Star group, and the other forums that are there on product management. People will be talking about product management and what is going on in their domains. They'll help you enhance your skills. Read books on product management. There are a lot of video tutorials which are there on product management on YouTube. There's Udemy, and there are many other forums which will be there. Just watch those videos to enhance your skills. And finally, network with other product managers. Ask them questions, know what they're doing, and that will really help you grow.
All right. I think that's it for our today's session. Thank you very much, Prashant. You helped us a lot. I had such a pleasure to communicate with you, and your presentation was great. It really structured my vision on how to pass my future interviews, and I hope that everyone else also gained some knowledge from today's session.
Thank you so much for having me here.